The Joe Rogan Experience.
The larger question here was, you asked me, like, what can we do? And what I'm saying is, there are some things like identity authentication that I think would help. But yes, there are implementation problems. There's all kinds of political questions. So my basic point is, man, those problems I don't know that we can solve, but we can do better. Oh, and I should point out, a lot of these have to do with the basic architecture of the web. When we moved from Web 1, which was put up information, it's amazing, you can see things from everywhere, to Web 2, which was directly interactive. Now you can buy things, you can post stuff, and it's the Web 2 that gave us these business models that are about that have led to the exploitation of children and everyone else. And I'm part of a group, Project Liberty, if you go to projectliberty.io, that's trying to have a better Web 3. Where people will own their own data more clearly. As the architecture changes, it opens us up to new possibilities and risks. So there are some hopes for a better internet coming down the pike. But I just wanted to put all this stuff out there about democracy to say this is really hard. But when we talk about kids and mental health, this is actually amazingly doable. Like, we could do this in a year or two. And the key to solving this whole problem with kids is to understand what's called a collective action problem. So there are certain things where, like if you have a bunch of fishermen and they realized, we're overfishing the lake, let's reduce our catch. And if one person does that, no one else does, well, then he just loses money. But if everyone does it, well, then actually you can solve the problem and everyone can do fine. With social media, what we see over and over again is kids are on it because everyone else is. And parents are giving their kids a phone in 6th grade because the kid says everyone else has one and I'm left out. And over again, you see this. When you ask kids, how would you feel if I took your Instagram or TikTok away? You're like, oh, I'd hate that. But then you say, well, what if it was taken away from everyone? What if no one had it? And they almost always say, that would be great. I did this. There's an academic article that showed this with college students. I did it as a test with my students at NYU, and a review of the book of The Anxious Generation in the Times of London, and the UK Times. The woman ended by asking her 16-year-old, "Would you have liked there to be a social media ban until you were 16?" I think the daughter was 18 at the time. This was last month, and the daughter says, "Would everyone else be off it too?" And she says, "Yes." And then the daughter says, "Yeah, I would have rather liked that." And so you have this consumer product that the people using it don't see value in it. They're using it because everyone else is. And there's evidence suggesting it's messing up their mental health. So anyway, this is a solvable problem if we act together. And that's really what the book is about.
How would you do that, though? How would you get all the parents to do it? Would you get the social media companies to do it? How would you do that?
Yeah, I'm not counting on the social media companies or Congress. I'm assuming we'll never get help from either one. Now, I hope I'm wrong about Congress. But as a social psychologist, I'm trying to point out, we can actually solve this ourselves. And so let's work. The simplest one is this. So I propose 4 norms. If we can enact these 4 norms ourselves as parents and working with schools, we can largely solve the problem. We can certainly reduce rates of mental illness a lot. The first norm is the simplest: no smartphone before high school. Now people say, oh my God, but my kid needs a phone. Sure, give him a flip phone. The millennials had flip phones and they were fine. Flip phones did not harm millennials' mental health. They're good for communication. You text, you call, that's it. So the first rule is no smartphones before high school. And as long as a third of the parents do this, well, then the rest of the parents are free to say when their kid says, Mom, I need a smartphone. Some other kids have one. Then you can say, well, no, here's a flip phone. You'll be with the kids who don't have one. Oh, and by the way, you're also going to get a lot more freedom to hang out with the other kids. So we don't need everybody, but we need to break the feeling that everyone has to have one because everyone else has one.
Yeah, that sounds great on paper. I can't imagine that most parents would agree to it because there's just so many parents that don't pay attention.
That's true.
Especially two families where 2 people are working.
Yeah, no, you're right. When we look right now, it's kids with married parents are trying harder to keep the kids off. These things are good babysitting devices in the sense that the kids are off doing their thing. You don't have to think about them. So it is true that this would not be adopted universally at first. But I think we could still develop a norm that it's just not appropriate for children to have a smartphone. They should have flip phones. And I think that any community that wants to do this, because what I find over and over again is that most parents are really concerned about this. And this is across social classes. Most parents are seeing the problems. And so I don't have to convince parents to change their minds about something. What I'm trying to do with the book is show them here are 4 norms that are pretty easy to do if others are doing them. And these are going to make your kids happier, less mentally ill.
Yeah, like I said, it sounds like a good suggestion. I just don't imagine that with the momentum that social media has today and the ubiquitous use that kids are going to give it up. They're not going to want to give it up. I think there's a lot of kids that have had problems that if you talk to them alone and you say, wouldn't it be better if social media didn't exist, if they've been bullied or what have you, they'd say yes.
Yeah.
But the idea of getting a massive group of people to adopt this is highly unlikely.
Well, you may be right, but I'm encouraged because whenever I speak to Gen Z audiences, and I've spoken to middle schools, high schools, college audiences, I always ask, do you think I got this wrong, or do you think this is a correct description of what's happening? They agree. They're not in denial. They see the phones are messing them up. They see that social media is messing up the girls especially. So, even in middle school, certainly high school, the kids actually agree that this is a problem. And so if it was offered to them, you know what, let's do the other 3 norms. Let's get them all on the table.
Yeah,
and then
please.
All right, so the first is no smartphone before high school. Second is no social media till 16. That one's going to be a little harder to do. But the big platforms like Instagram, the place where you're posting and the whole world is seeing and strangers are contacting you, I think the age is currently 13 and it's not enforced. I think that needs to go up to 16. Here, it would be nice if Congress would raise the age to 16 and make the companies enforce it. But even if they don't, parents, as long as many other parents are doing it, I as a parent, my kids are 14 and 17. As long as many other parents are saying 16 is the age, then it's very easy for me to say that also. That's the second norm.
Yeah, if you could get them to say it. And I think the kids would push back so hard because so many other kids are on it, and that's how they interact with each other.
Right, but Joe, you're just reiterating the collective action problem. You're just saying they react because all the other kids are on it.
Yes.
So it does require a big push. But I think we're ready. I don't think we were ready in 2019. It wasn't as clear. But now that we're through COVID, now that the numbers are through the roof, I think we're ready. And if it starts in some places and not others, that's okay with me. That's the way it's going to be. And then we'll see whether it spreads.
And then we'll see the data.
Yeah, but because look at smoking. Smoking is highly addictive. It was very common up through the 1990s. And now it's very rare in high school. Very few high school kids smoke. So it's possible to change norms.
And what was the third?
The third is phone-free schools. And this one is happening. This is already happening. So I've published articles in The Atlantic and on my Substack, afterbabble.com, bringing together the research. When kids have a phone in their pocket in school, they're going to be texting. Because if anyone is texting during the school day, they all have to check because they don't want to be out of the loop. They don't want to be the one who doesn't know. So when kids started bringing smartphones into school instead of flip phones, academic achievement actually went down. Kids are stupider today than they were 15 years ago. I mean, stupider meaning measuring their academic progress. After 50 years of improvement, it turns around after 2012. And this is true in the U.S. and internationally. So there's just no reason why kids should have the phone on them. They should come in the morning, put it in a phone locker or a yonder pouch, go about their day. And guess what? The schools that have tried it, after a week or two, everyone loves it. The kids are like, oh, wow, we actually talk in between classes. We have 5 minutes in the hallway. We actually talk. And you hear laughter. Whereas right now in a lot of schools, it's just zombies looking at their phones in between as they're walking from class to class.
Yeah. So the assumption is that from 2012, kids are just much more distracted?
Oh, my God. I mean, look, Joe, I think I heard you say in one of, it was a conversation you had a few weeks ago with a comedian friend of yours. And I think this was a direct quote from you. My fucking phone runs my goddamn life. Does that sound like you?
Yeah, it sounds like me.
Okay. So, as adults, we have a fully formed prefrontal cortex. You and I had a normal childhood. Our brains developed. We have the ability to stay on task. And man, it is hard with notifications coming in. There's always so many interesting things you could do instead of what you need to do. So it's hard enough for us as adults. Imagine if you didn't have a normal childhood where you developed executive function, where you developed that ability. as a teenager, because puberty is when the prefrontal cortex, the front part of the brain, that's when it rewires into the adult configuration. So the fact that we're scrambling kids' attention at the time when they're supposed to be learning how to pay attention, I think is terrible.
Where do you think this is going? This is my concern, is that this is just the beginning of this integration that we have with devices.
Yeah.
And that the social media model, and it's been immensely profitable.
Yes.
And
oh my God. Yes.
incredibly addictive.
Yep.
And there's a massive amount of capital that's invested in keeping us locked into these things. Where do you think this goes from here? Have you paid attention to the technology,
like AI?
Yeah.
Yes. So let me just draw a very, very sharp, bright line between adults and children. I'm very reluctant to tell adults what to do. If adults want to spend their time on an addictive substance or device or gambling, I'm reluctant to tell them that they can't. So when we're talking about adults, I think where this is going where it's gone so far is everything that you might want becomes available instantly and for free with no effort. And so in some ways that's a life of convenience, but in other ways it's messing us up and it's making us weaker. So, you want sexual satisfaction, okay, here you go, free porn. And it gets better and better and more intense. You want a girlfriend or boyfriend who you can customize, you have that already. Advances in robotics are such that it's just a matter of time before AI girlfriends are put into these incredible female bodies that you can customize. So I think the adult world, for young adults especially, is going to get really, really messed up. And again, I'm not saying we need to ban it now. But what I'm saying is, for God's sakes, don't let this be 11-year-old children's lives. Let's at least keep children separate from all this craziness until their brains develop. And then they can jump into the whirlpool and the tornado. But the fact that our 11-year-old girls are now shopping at Sephora for anti-wrinkle cream or all sorts of expensive skin treatments, this is complete insanity.
Yeah.
So let's at least protect the kids until they're through puberty.
Well, that would be nice. That would be nice.
Kind of essential, I think.
It's just the way I see adults being so hooked on these things. There's so many adults that I know that are engrossed in this world of other people's opinions of everything they think and say.
That's right.
And it just doesn't give you enough time to develop your own thoughts and opinions on things.
That's right.
So many people are dependent upon other people's approval. And there's just so many people that are addicted to interacting with people online and not interacting with exceptional people in the real world.
Yeah, that's right. One way to think about this is let's look at junk food, which became very popular after the Second World War. The manufacturing of food became very good. There were science labs. At Frito-Lay, they studied the exact degree of tensile strength that a chip should have before it snaps. And, how do you make this? What's the perfect crunch? So they designed the foods to be as addictive as possible. And in the 70s and 80s, Americans switched over to a lot of junk food and we became obese, like a huge increase in obesity. And that kept going on for a few decades. As I understand it, obesity has finally turned around a little bit. And many people are still eating huge amounts of junk food, but at least some people are beginning to say, you know what, I'm going to resist that. Deep evolutionary programming for fat and sugar. The companies played to that. They hijacked those desires, and they got us hooked on junk food. But after 50 years, we're making some progress in pushing back and having healthier snacks and eating less.
What's the root of that progress?
I don't actually know the numbers. I just know a few years ago I saw something that for the first time obesity actually went down in the United States. I don't know that that's still true today, but this was like 3 or 4 years ago. Before COVID, I saw something.
Do we know what caused it to go down?
I don't. I'm just assuming that this is an issue that we dealt with as a society, and we didn't know what we were doing at first, and we got hooked. And the efforts to educate people and to develop healthier alternatives